evening, it's Renee here. Welcome to our online tutorial, Basic Research Theory. Before we start, can I just please get confirmation that you guys can hear me? Can you just send me a little yay message or thumbs up or something so that we can just make sure that you guys can hear me? Can I just repeat, Alisa, Tina? Tina, can you just confirm that you can hear me? Okay, great. So let's kick off the session. So yes, tonight we're going to cover basic research theory and just a few things before we start. Sometimes during these online tutorials there might be a technical glitch. If by any chance something happens like that, we have a very competent Genevieve who helps and assists us. So if by any chance something like that happens, you will just have to bear with me. I will just pop out for a second or two and get her assistance, and then we will be up and running again. But I'm pretty sure nothing's going to happen. The second thing that I want you to keep in mind is as I talk and take you through the tutorial and you have any serious questions, I think best is if you just type them there and then and let's address them whilst we're still on the topic. That's usually a lot easier than going back. But yeah, so then just type as and when. I will keep an eye on the dialogue box and then respond to your question. Then the third thing that I want to share with you is that my background, I studied many years ago and I knew that I want to move into marketing, but I had no clue that there was something like market research. And it was purely, look, I got a job in a marketing research department of a big corporate and I loved it. But why do I like research? Because it's now many years later and I'm still very heavily involved in research. Because most people think that research is pretty much a nerdy subject. It's just all about figures and stats and boring stuff. And yes, there are figures, there are statistics, there are maths and modeling in research. But research is just so much more. And for me, being in research over so many years, I've learned so much. I've because you get roped in with so many projects in your organization, and you usually have a very good clue of what's happening all over in the organization. So it's a very exciting area within marketing. And I suppose that's why I loved it so much. So that's just a little bit of background about me. I am not that much of an academic. Don't get me wrong, I do know the textbook, I do know my theory, but I love the practical side of research. And quite often when I do these tutorials, I will here and there give you a little bit of a tip how to do things just a little bit different, but it helps and it's just a little bit more easier than the textbook way, but it will still be correct. Okay, so let's kick off. Okay, so what's the objective of tonight? Yes, you guys have a textbook and you have quite a few study units. But for me, our first objective tonight is really to provide you guys with the know-how to do your assignment, which is due by the 15th of August, which is really around the corner. It's literally 2 weeks, or just slightly over 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now. So, and we really only have 2.5 hours. So the topics that I'm going to touch on now tonight will really enable you to complete your assignment. And then when we have our next tutorial, which is scheduled for the 19th of September, I will then touch on all the study units. I will first give you a review of the main components within each study unit that are important. And then we will try and see what sort of questions were asked in previous papers and then try and answer them as we work through all the study units in your textbook and to Learner Guide. And I hope that will help you guys to tackle this module of research. So tonight, really, if I skip something, it doesn't mean it's unimportant. It just really means that for your assignment, it is not a focus right now. Our first priority is to enable you guys to do your assignment and do well in that assignment. Okay, so the modules that or the chapters, the study units in your textbook and your learner guide that we have to touch on to be able to do the assignment is chapter 1 to 5. And it's your practice of market research, the different types of market research, defining the market research process, writing your market research brief, and then secondary research. Okay, so I think it's just important before we really kick off, just to put it in perspective. What is market research? And you will really see on the slide, there are three components. On the left-hand side, there is the external environment. It's your market. It's people out there. They're users of services, of products. They buy. They are customers. They have opinions. They have attitudes. They have likes. They have dislikes. They experience something. And then on the extreme right, you have a business or organization. And the objective of the business is to make a profit. How do they make a profit? By selling to consumers out there, providing them with the service, make sure they're happy, make sure that you meet their needs, make sure that you address their dislikes and the things that don't work for you. But these two are on the extremes of the continuum. They're on the outside. They need a connector in between. And that's the role of the researcher. The researcher gets the information from the external market, from the consumers, from the customers. He zhoosh it all together, he packages it, he analyzes it, he understands it, and he takes it to the business unit and he tells them that this is what your customers want. This is what they don't want. This is what they like. Here you need to improve. Here you have to be aware of what the competitors do. Here's a need that you haven't met yet. So the researcher is actually a critical element between the external market and the internal market in the business. And all my years in research, I have always said, I am the voice of the customer. If someone in the business wants to know who is the customer, what does the customer want from them, speak to me because I will be the voice of the customer. So that puts it into perspective, the whole continuum out there in the market. And in the research industry, there are three roles that fits into that middle component of the researcher. There's the research buyer, research supplier, and research user. So what's the difference between the three? The first one, the research buyer, is someone who buys research. It is someone who goes to a research supplier and buys a report from them or commission them to do research amongst their customers or amongst a potential market and get feedback. So he buys from the supplier. The user is anyone who makes use of that information, that research data that was supplied by the research supplier. Now, sometimes the buyer and the user is one and the same person, but it's not always the case. Sometimes the user is also someone else. It can be a product manager. It can be the main strategist in your organization. It can be a marketing manager. It can be someone in charge of logistics. It can be someone else who also use this information, and it's not necessarily the buyer. And that's why we split buyer and researcher. Although sometimes, in a lot of cases, the buyer is also a user. So, how does research start? How does it start? How do you kick off a research project? Research always starts with a problem or an opportunity within an organization. Someone somewhere in the business is experiencing a problem that they need to fix, that they need to address, and they don't have the answers. Or they have observed an opportunity, they've stumbled across an opportunity, but they need more before they can take action, before they can take the right action. And that's usually where your market research starts. So you can see I would say in 99% of the incidences in the business world out there, the research project starts with either the buyer or the user. It's very seldom that it starts with the research supplier because it's within the business that someone noticed that there's a problem or opportunity. So it starts with that business research buyer or user. But there's different ways of doing research. So you have a problem, you have an opportunity. So that usually provides you context within which you do research. And the most common ones out there is consumer research. So you have a customer, you have a consumer, and you need to understand more about your consumer or your customer. Then the second one is business to business. So it's the business trying to understand what service or product can they deliver to another business, or what is the problem that they need to fix to deliver a better product or better service or have a better relationship with another business. Then there's advertising research. The name says it all. There are so many ways of advertising, but it's important to understand how effective is the research. Do people understand the message? Do they see the advertising? Is the advertising campaign past its shelf life? Are there changes, etc.? So advertising research. And then the last one is international research. And that's usually where research takes place in a different country. A perfect example is, for instance, you will have a company in South Africa who wants to expand into Africa. And they consider expanding their business into Botswana, but they know very little about Botswana. And they decided to go and do research in Botswana. That's international research. So it's outside the borders of the country where the research was initiated. So there's a process. It's very basic. When you do research, there's a process that you need to follow, and it's basically there are three components. There's the planning bit up front. Then there's the actual bit where the research takes place. It's what we call the field work, where there's interaction with people, interviews, conversations, questions that gets asked and answered, and that data gets collected. And then there's the last bit, because that data will help very few people. It means basically nothing. That data has to be reworked into some meaning, into information that can help to make decisions. So that's the third part where we talk about data analysis and reporting. And with each of them, there are a few components. In the planning part, there's the problem. Remember, I said market research always starts with either a problem or an opportunity. So that's where it starts. And you have to identify, you have to unpack that problem or that opportunity and develop problem statements. And further on, we will cover the problem statements. Then the next step is to write a brief, and we will cover the research brief in detail. Then there's a component that you go through where you develop the research design. Um, and and then there's a research proposal. Now here, but the three things in terms of research brief, design, and proposal is also where the different role players play a role. Usually, your research buyer develop the research brief. The research buyer can give input into the research design. The research buyer can share their views and their needs and expectations with regards to the design with a research supplier. The research proposal gets compiled by the research supplier. So it's that independent company. Their business is to do market research. They will compile a proposal then. And then the research get commissioned. And that's usually your buyer that says, listen, company A, I love your proposal, or we need to tweak it, but I'm going ahead with your proposal. Please, I commission you to do the research for me. The next category, the field work, most of it gets done by the research supplier, the research agency, with input and collaboration of the research buyer or user. But the work gets done, the majority of the work gets done by the research supplier. And then step 3 is also that is a combination of supplier and buyer/user. The data analysis is usually that is the supplier who will conduct all the data analysis with guidelines from the user or the buyer. Same the reporting. In most instances, it will be the supplier who compile the report with taking into consideration requirements of the buyer and user, and the same with presenting the findings. But you do find that in some businesses, with presenting the findings, that is where the role of the supplier stops. And the buyer or the user will usually take that role of presenting the findings further in the organization. So it's not a clear cut here. It can be the supplier, or it can be the buyer, or it can be the user, or it can be a combination of all three. I hope that makes sense. So, for your assignment, what do you need to know? You have to focus on the problem. You need to understand how to write and develop a problem statement. First, a business problem. Secondly, a research problem. Then you have to be able to write a research brief. And in the research brief, you really need to understand how to develop objectives. You need to understand the different types of research. And that links to research design, because if you get to grips with research design, you will be able to cover in your research brief the different types of research and the methodology, the data collection method that you prefer the research user to apply to your project. So those three components are critical for you guys to be able to do your assignment. There's the next element as well. Usually when you get to the brief and the research design, you also had to do some secondary research. And so it fits in within those first three blocks. And that's also part of your assignment. You have to do some secondary research. I think it's your question 3 or question 4. It's the last question of your assignment. Okay. So, as we said, where does it start? It starts with a problem or an opportunity somewhere in the business. And once that problem was identified, you go into the next step where you develop a business problem. And once you've developed your business problem, you go to the next step where you develop a research problem. But are they the same? Are they different? And if they're different, how do they differ? What do you need to know to be able to do that? First things first, when you develop a problem statement, it helps you in the research process. It's the first step in that whole research. It ensures that you understand the problem. You will see right now. It ensures that everyone is in agreement with this problem. It will also help you to develop the research objectives, and you will see that later on. It will guide you in terms of how to do your secondary research, what information is required. And it will also guide you in terms of the primary research process. So that problem statement phase is very, very important. If we get that wrong, your research will be wrong. Your end result will be wrong. You will not be able to provide the business unit with usable information. So you have to focus and spend time on designing and unpacking the problem statements. Okay. So as we said, there are two. There's the business problem statement and the research problem statement. Are they the same? No, they're not. They're very different because your business problem statement is action oriented. You need to take action. And on the next slide, I will show you. And your research problem is information oriented. And I will show you now later on how we distinguish between what is action and what's information. Give me 1 second. It's getting very hot in this room. I just want to take off my jacket. Okay, so let's start. As I said, business problem statement is action oriented. What do I mean by that? It means the business has identified a problem or an opportunity that they can take advantage of. They need to know what action do they need to take to address the problem, or what action do they need to take advantage of the opportunity. So it's the action. The business problem is all about doing something. They have to implement something, they have to develop something, they have to change something, they have to address something, so they have to implement something. There is an action. Where your research problem is information. So for that business to take action and to take the right action, they need information. So your research problem is different. It is what information does that business need for them to address the problem or to take advantage of the opportunity? I hope this makes sense. It is very important that you understand the differences between the two. Otherwise, you are going to get it wrong. And there is a very specific question. I think the first question in your assignment is about developing a business problem statement and following onto it a research problem statement. So I think let's work through an example. Maybe that will help you guys. So let's say there's a retailer out there, and the head office in the retail for the specific retail company have noticed that there's a significant decrease in sales in one of its stores. But this is the only store where there's such a decrease. In fact, in all the other stores, the sales increase month on month. But this store now, for the last 3-4 months, they've seen a decrease. They have no idea what's happening here, and they've called the research manager to help them with some research. So, what is the business problem here, and what's the research problem? The business problem is the retailer need to understand why is there a decrease in sales in this specific store versus an increase in sales in all the other stores so that they can take corrective action, so that they can implement some actions, activities, or campaigns to change this downward trend or this decrease in sales. Can you see here? They need to take action. The problem is about what do they need to do to reverse that problem, to address it, fix it, and reverse it so that this store also shows an increase in sales. The research problem is what information does this retailer need to take action? They need certain information. They need to know what is happening. Why are the information that they need is why are there a decrease in sales? Why? And why is there an increase in sales in all the other stores? Once I understand that, which is information, the reason, and it's their research problem, they can go over into solving mode to fix the business problem. So before we carry on, can you guys just indicate to me that you understand the differences between the two? I just really want to make double sure that you are comfortable with the differences between the business problem and research problem. Anyone out there wants to give me an indication? Okay. Some of you have indicated that there's happiness on your side, so I'm going to carry on. Okay. As I said, from your research problem, you will be able then to develop research objectives. But your research objectives are part of a research brief. So I'm going to cover it under the building blocks of a research brief. So let's tackle this research brief. What is a research brief and why do you do a research brief? A research brief gets done by the research buyer. So if you're the research manager in a business and you're going to ask a research supplier to do some research for you, you're going to develop a research brief. So it's the responsibility of the research buyer. So remember also in your context, in your assignment, take it from the perspective of you, the research buyer, and you are putting a document together for the research suppliers so that they can create a proposal for you. So the research brief is a formal document. It is not just a conversation. It is a formal document. It is a written document. And it's a full record of what is required. It is also quite often a reference document. So, why am I calling it a reference document? You will sometimes get to a point where there is, in the research process, maybe a dispute or some differences, or someone queries something. Then you can go back to the brief that's been put together, that was the foundation for the proposal, the approval of the proposal, and the field work following up on that, and see exactly what was the requirement. So all the requirements for that research project is documented in your research brief. So it's very useful also at the end when you review your project. And I know most of us don't want to admit it because our objective in life is to do a job well. But life happens. And sometimes you get at the end of a research project and Someone in your business, some business owners that, oh, that's not what I had in mind. Get that research brief out again. Sit and make sure. Because what I did in all my years in research was whenever I wrote a research brief, before I shared it with the suppliers, I went back to my business owner and I sat and I worked through the brief with them and I got the approval, their stamp of approval that the research brief is correct. So you cover all ends. You make sure that everyone is happy in the process. Okay. So, and before you write this brief, you need to know certain things. You need to know what is your problem or your opportunity. The business, in the business, what's the business problem? What's the opportunity? What decisions must the business take? What are they planning to do? What actions? What information will help the business to take action, which is your research problem? How will the research help them? Will it help them to make a decision, or is it just a nice to know? What objectives must the research cover? How much time and money is available to do this research? And the last point is actually very important because money can be a stickler, and research is quite an expensive process. And quite often, business owners do not understand how expensive it is. So you have to make sure that there is sufficient money available. And whatever money is available, you need to share it with your research supplier so that they know the constraints or the parameters that they're working within. Also, how will the research help to make the decision? Very, very important element. Because sometimes people can ask you to do research and it's not really necessary to do research. A perfect example in all my years' work, I was called in by our credit card division and they were looking at launching a new credit card and they asked me to do research on what should the color of that credit card be. Sounds reasonable, but if you really understand the product credit card, there were a few problems with this request. First of all, the most popular color is blue. The bank who wanted to do this research, their corporate color was most definitely not blue. But one of their biggest competitors' corporate color was blue. So, what do you think? What would they have done if the majority of consumers out there said they wanted a blue card? There was no way somehow that they were going to develop the blue card. It was just never going to fly. The second aspect is people don't apply for a credit card because of the color. They apply it because there is a need for a credit card. There are certain benefits in having a credit card, and they can benefit from having a credit card in their wallet. Yes, there are status elements. There's a gold card, there's a black card, there's a silver card. But you know what? If the only card that you can get is a silver card, you are not going to say no thank you and because it's not black or platinum. You're going to take it. So my recommendation to this division was the research is probably going to cost you 120 to 150,000 rand. Rather use it, add it to your marketing budget, and spend the money well in terms of marketing the benefits of your product to the right customer. So you can see, you have to sit and understand how will the research help, because you can end up doing a massive project all for nothing, because it's not really going to benefit. So what are the building blocks of a research brief? And that's very important. There's 15 building blocks. Make sure that you address all 15 in your assignment. There must be a title. The second part is the definition of the problem. Then there's background information to the problem. Then it's why is the research necessary? Remember, we just talked about it. There's a statement of research objectives. And remember, I said to you up front, I will cover research objectives in the elements, the building blocks of a research brief. So we will get to it. How is the information going to be used? Who is the target population? What is your suggested approach? So the type of research, the analysis that you require, certain outputs, who do they have to liaise with, what is the timing, the budget, how do you want the proposal, and what's the selection criteria when you look at the proposal. So let's look at each of these building blocks in isolation. Title. You will not believe it. When I mark research briefs, how many people leave off the title? You always start a document with a title. And what's the use of it? It really informs the reader of that brief immediately what the document is about. What is this research about? Immediately, it put them in the right frame of mind. I know it's about car sales. I know it's about a new advertising campaign. I know it's about a specific product in the youth market. They will know immediately. And apart from it putting them in the right frame of mind, it tells them immediately in 2 sentences what it's about. It just looks professional. This is how you do things in the business world. The second building block is define the problem. What's the problem? It's your business problem and your research problem. So as we discussed earlier, first, what action must the business take to fix a problem? That's your business problem statement. Followed by your research problem. What information does the business need to take action to fix the business problem? Now, I see a lot of times that people will say, my business problem is that there is a decrease in sales in one of our branches, whilst the other branches show an increase in sales. Remember, that's not a business problem. That's just saying what the problem is, but it's not a business problem statement. Your statement has to carry on. It's more than that. It is now corrective measures are required. The business needs to understand what action do they need to take to change that trend of decrease in sales. So don't stop with the first part. You have to carry on. You have to say what actions, what activities, what do they need to change to fix the problem. And the research problem is also not to, it is what information is required. What do they need to know to implement actions to stop a decrease in sales? That's your research problem. The second part is background information to this problem. And here you can include information about the organization, about the product, about the branch, about competitors, etc. But most important is that should not be the only information. You need to find relevant information about the business problem. So, if we look at our previous example of a decrease in sales, first of all, when did the decrease in sales start? How severe is the trend? Which branch? What was the sales targets in those branch? What happened in that branch during the time that sales decrease took place? Who are the customers that are going to that branch? Do they differ from other branches? What are competitors doing in that environment? Who are the competitors that are competing with that branch? So it's information relevant to the business problem. I can remember my third year student. We once asked him to write a briefing document, and it is about developing a banking app specifically for the youth market. And people gave me pages and pages of information about the unbanked market in South Africa. That's not what I was looking for. It was about banking, yeah, but it had nothing to do with the business problem. Really nothing. So you cannot expect to actually achieve a lot of marks for your background information if it doesn't relate back to your business problem. So yes, there's lots of information out there, but it has to be relevant. Some information has to be relevant. How big is the market? What's your market share? What's your strategy? Um, what activities have you taken? How much money have you spent? How does your product compare with that of the competitors? Who are the competitors? What are they doing different? What's your price? Things that are very specific to that business problem. Okay. Then element number 4, building block number 4, is why is the research necessary? Now, you have to include all possible reasons. Why do you believe the research is necessary? Now, to give you a tip is think. Think about your business problem. So let's look at our example, the decrease of sales in a specific branch. So why are you doing the research? What will happen if you do not address that problem? What will happen in it might mean that they have to cut staff, that they have to close down the branch, that there are not going to be increases. So can you see here? Those are possible reasons. You have to understand this problem because if you don't address this problem with your research, providing them the information, these are the potential outcomes. Also, you can think about the ideal situation. So if you fix the problem, if you have the information, if the research gave you the information where you can understand the problem, then you can implement an advertising campaign. You can train your staff. You can maybe relocate the branch. Maybe it's the wrong location. So it's really, those are the reasons why you're doing the research in our specific example, why the research is necessary. So here, that's a tip. Think about all the possible bad things that can happen and think about the ideal situation if you fix the problem or you take advantage of the opportunity. And those are the reasons why you're doing research. The next statement, building block, is your statement or research objective. Now, to develop a research objective, you use your problem statement, your business problem, and your research problem statement. And that will help you to develop your objective. Because your objectives, your research objectives, is really just a statement that tell you what was the research tell you? What information do you need from the research? That is your research objective. And to develop your research objectives, to understand what the research must tell you, to make sure that you develop it correctly, it can be you can explore for opportunities, you can just try and describe the reasons or a situation, you can explain something, you can evaluate it, or you can look at it from a strategic point of view. So those are the things that your objectives can do in research. And to help you when you develop your objectives, always start your objectives with one of these words. Because I'm telling you, if you can start your objectives with one of these words, you're already on the right track. Assess, evaluate, understand. Understand the reasons behind the decline in sales. Um, Explore alternative options. Investigate, develop, measure. Measure the service versus the level of service in other branches. Um, Investigate the training, the exposure, if it's the right profile of staff. Understand the consumer and their needs. So you can see when you use these words to start your research objective with, immediately you get onto the right track. And your objectives must link back to first and foremost your research problem and your business problem. So they must refer back to your research problem and your business problem. If it doesn't in some way refer back to that, then it's probably not the right research objective. Then building block number 6, the use of information. Here you have to ask some questions. And then you will be able to complete this section in your brief. It is first, who will use the information? It is the marketing manager, or it's the strategy manager, or it's the product manager, or it's the sales manager who will use, or the branch manager who will make use of this information. How will they use it? They will try and change this downward trend by implementing corrective measures. When will they use it? They will try and stabilize the decrease problem before the end of the year, so they have to implement some actions soon, so they need the information soon. So when you answer these questions, you will be able to build the block on how the information will be used. Your target population. This is so important. Because if you get the target population wrong, then you will not be able to use your findings. If we use our example of decrease of sales in a brand, if you have a sample of 100 people, and only 3 people in that sample are customers of that branch, and the rest are all customers of other branches, do you think you will be able to tell the business what's wrong in that branch, why there's a decrease in sales? No, you won't. So the development of your target population is extremely important. It simply means who are the people that you're going to include and or exclude from your research. Who are the people that you want to contact? The people that need to give you feedback, who need to give you some information, what you need from them. Who are those people? And you need to be very, very precise, very specific, lots of detail regarding this aspect. You cannot just say, anyone who have used branch X, that's not really going to help. Anyone who used branch X, what if I used that branch 5 years ago? I have no, and that was the only time. I have no clue. What if I've only used the branch once and in the past? So I have no feedback. I can't give you any. What if I've never used it? I don't even know where the branch is. So you have to be very specific. And you need to describe it in a very specific way. Now, the elements that you can use to prescribe, to define your target market are things like demographic, lifestyle, customers versus non-customers, customers versus customers from competitors, users and non-users, or only non-users of a product or service, geographical distribution. So for me, if that branch, one branch only, maybe it's going to only be in that area, or it's only going to be in the Gauteng province, or it is only going to be in a town, or it's only people who live in metropolitan areas. So that's geographic. Demographics. Is it going to be male, female? What age are they? Are they going to be married? What language do they speak? Do they have to work? Are they going to be students? Lifestyle. Maybe you do research on smartphones. Do they have to own a smartphone? Or maybe it's people that use their smartphone 20 times a day instead of just once. So that's a lifestyle. Is it customers and non-customers of the business? So you want to compare how your customers feel versus customers of the competitors. Or people who've never used you before. Sometimes that's also important to look at people who've never used you before. People who are not using the product or who have stopped using your product. So it's very, very important to really define who your target market is. You can't just say, I want to speak to people who own a cell phone. Is it people who live only in urban areas? Are you going to include rural? Are you going to exclude rural? Is it a specific cell phone? What do they use on their cell phone? How often do they use their cell phone? Is it all age groups, or are you going to exclude the older people? Is it people using smartphones versus people who don't have a smartphone? So really, really think about it. Building block number 8 is the suggested approach. Quite often this is left out. In a briefing document where the research buyer or user will say to the agency, you know what, you come up with a suggestion and you motivate to me what approach we need to follow. Don't do that in your assignment. That's what's happening in real life, but in your assignment, make a suggestion. What approach do you think needs to be followed? And motivate your suggestions. So how do you go about it? You know, there are different types of research. There's cross-sectional, there's longitudinal, explanatory and causal, experimental, and case study research. And there are significant differences between them. Okay. Okay, so what is the characteristics of cross-sectional? It is research that takes place at a point in time, but it gets repeated. And every time when you repeat that research survey, it is a new sample. But it doesn't mean that it's totally new. It means it's the same sample technique, it's the same target population, but it's fresh, it's new people. So if it was a random sample of people between 18 and 25-year-olds who study full-time, and you do the survey every year in June, that's cross-sectional. So the sample, it will not be every time the same students, but every time when you do the survey, it will be a random sampling technique. It will be people between 18 and 25 years old, and they will be full-time students. So the criteria is exactly the same, but it's not the same respondents. You will usually ask the same question. Sometimes you add a question in or you leave a question out, but the majority of the questions will be the same because remember, it gets repeated. It's the same methodology. So if it is a email questionnaire, then every time you will use the email questionnaire, you will not switch to telephonic interviews. So in essence, to sum it up, cross-sectional research is more than one wave of research. So you do a study at a point of time, and you do it, for instance, every second year, or every quarter, or once a year, or every month, etc. An example here can be, for instance, let's say, a company that measure, a bank that measure the service levels in its branches. So once a year, they contact 100 customers for each of their branches and they measure their service experience. So every year, that study happens in November. Every year, it is customers who have used their services in the last month. But it's not every year the same customers. They had the same activity. And every year they ask the same questions because that's the only way they can compare the findings. So it's more than one wave of the same research every year. Longitudinal is, that is the best way to describe it is actually to say it's panel research. So you will have a panel of people, you recruit people according to a certain criteria. Maybe it's people who drive a BMW. They gave their permission, they sit on the panel, and they're happy to give you feedback on certain topics on the BMW. So if the study gets repeated, it's every time the same people, it's the same questions that get asked, but sometimes it's not. It's the same methodology, but sometimes it's not. But if you track changes over time with a panel, then it has to be the same sample, it has to be the same questions, it has to be the same methodology. And that's actually where a panel gets used most. It is, say for instance, you have an advertising campaign, you have a panel to check the perceptions about your brand before the campaign, the week that you kick off the campaign, a week thereafter, a month thereafter, 6 months thereafter. So you track over time how their perceptions and their knowledge and their views of the campaign are changing. Experimental. This is really where you measure the effect of one variable on another in research. So one variable stays the same and one changes. Example is, if I increase my price tomorrow for coffee beans, what is the impact of that on my sales? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to go down? Will it go down and then it will go back to normal levels? What's the impact on sales? Or if I close this branch or outlet, what will the impact be on buying behavior in that specific area? Will they move to another branch? Will they move to a competitor? Will they buy another product, etc.? The best way to do this is usually to have a test group where you implement the change to see how they're going to react on this changing variable, and a control group where nothing changes. And it's usually, like I said, it also gets referred to as causal or exploratory. Um, so that's where you explore certain things. And then the last one is your case study. And that is an in-depth investigation of a case, a strategy, a campaign, a situation. It gets used in the academic world. You have in your assignment, you have case studies. We give you a lot of information of what's happened around a certain topic. For you to make sense out of a case study, you need to get the full picture. You need, if you put a case study together, you have to investigate it from all sorts of angles. You have to consider various sources of information. You have to look at external influences like events, like relationships, any other influences. So it is very complex. It's more than just a survey where you ask a few questions. A case study is a lot more, and it's in depth, and it's usually about something that has happened already, and you unpack that. And when you look at your suggested approach in your research brief, so you can say, yes, the type of research is going to be longitudinal, or it's going to be explorative, or it's going to be causal. And the approach that I want to follow is qualitative or quantitative. Now you will see the spelling of the words. That's the easiest way that I can explain to you. People constantly get it wrong. They will talk about qualitative research where they actually mean quantitative, and the opposite. Qualitative means L equals language. So qualitative is where you work with small samples. You analyze the data according to what people say, how they feel, what they like, what they don't like. It's the language that they use. It's such small samples that you cannot do statistical analysis. You cannot create graphs, you cannot calculate percentages, and that's usually where you have your focus groups or your in-depth information and in-depth discussion guides and groups and interviews. And it's from exploratory. You really just explore certain topics. You explore people's feelings. You explore their attitudes, their likes and dislikes. So that's why I've highlighted the L. It is qualitative. So if you, in your research information that you want a lot of emotion and feelings and attitudes, etc., you're going to tell the agency that you would like to do qualitative research. Quantitative, the N stands for numbers. It's longitudinal, it's cross-sectional, it's causal. And this is where you do big surveys with samples of 100, of 200, of 500, of 1,000. You have a very structured questionnaire. It's not just a conversation. And you analyze the answers to the questions in terms of statistics. It's percentages, there's modeling, there are graphs. So it's about the numbers. And this is where you do your interviews, like telephone interviews, like internet, web-based interviews, like personal interviews, intercept more interviews. So on this building block, when you build your research brief, you first tell them what type of research it is. Then you say to them, I would like to do qualitative. My reason, this is my reason. I want to get to the feelings, to the bottom of how they feel. Or no, I really want to understand the numbers. I really want to forecast what's going to happen in the future. I want to see how many people are going to leave me. I want to see how they rate it. I want a score. Or it can be a combination. I want both. I want to first do a qualitative and get the feelings. Then I want to verify it with the numbers by doing the question. Or the other way around. I first want to do a questionnaire to see the ratings, and then I want to do qualitative to see how they feel, how it makes them feel. So you have to make sure that you cover this in detail in your research brief. Then block number 9 of your research brief is the analysis required. You have to tell the research company what analysis do you want, especially if you have very specific requirements. And that can include, you either want to do segmentation, you want to do forecasting, you want to do what-if scenarios, you want them to analyze specific subsets of your target population and compare it. So I want to compare male versus female, or I want to compare um, working people versus non-working people. I want to compare full-time students versus part-time students. So it's very important to tell the research supplier in your brief what it is. Or maybe you just want plain normal cross-tab tabulations with percentages calculated. Then tell them that, but be very specific. Number 10, outputs. This is, what do you want? Once they've conducted the research, once they've done the analysis, then what do they need to do? What do you want? Because there are so many options out there. And it's not one or the other, it can be a combination. And these options, they all have an impact on timing and on cost. So it is very important that you upfront tell the research agency what outputs you expect from this, because they have to build it into their costing, they have to build it into their timing, they have to make sure that they have the necessary resources to to plan for it. And the options can be, you just want cross stats. You want nothing else. Just give me cross stats. Or I want a top line result. I just want, on a few questions, I just want, what are the answers here? Tell me what to do. Or you want a presentation, or you want a number of presentations to different audiences. So you have to adapt the presentation. You want a written report, or you want a number of written reports. Maybe it is a quality service survey amongst 500 banking branches. You want a written report for each branch. You want to do workshops. You want access to video recordings. Say you do qualitative research. You want photographs of who were the people that were interviewed. You want audio. Or you can ask for any combination. You can ask for all of the above. You can ask for any of the combinations of the above, or you can ask just for one, as long as you cover it in your research brief. Building block number 11, liaison. Who will be the contact person or persons in your organization? If there's a question, if something goes wrong, if they need more help, assistance, the research applied, who do they contact? Who are the people that they can contact? Who can't they contact? Maybe you don't want them to contact the director because he's going to be too busy, or he might not have the information, etc. Who are the people, their names, their telephone numbers, their email addresses? What will the preferred method of contact be? Is it phone calls? Do you want an SMS, email, Skype, video conferencing, physical meetings? Where will the meetings take place? And the frequency of the contact. Is it going to be on a need-to-know basis? Or will there be regular meetings at certain stages of the research project, or weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? Tell the research supplier in your brief, cover these elements. Who's the contact person? What method? What are their details? How often are you going to contact each other? Okay? And then the timing. This is so, so important. When do you need the deliverables? What is your date? Um, and sometimes also what by when. Because maybe you want top line at a certain stage and then only a month later you want the detailed report. Then tell them that. If you want interim results, what is it that you want and when? Why? Why do you need to tell them that? Because they need to plan. You cannot, when they plan to deliver a report at the end of October, tell them the middle of September that you actually want at the end of September. I can tell you that chances are 99.9% that they will not be able to meet your expectations. They need to plan. And if it means that they have to put in additional resources to make those deadlines, then it will have an impact on the cost of your project. Sometimes your timing is so condensed. You have so little timing available before you need information that it will also have an impact on the type and the methodology of research. If you need information within a month, maybe you cannot do a worldwide, countrywide, national personal interviews of 2000. Maybe you then need to do dipstick email interviews, or you need to do qualitative. So as you can see, the timing is very important. Budget. Always give them an indication of what is your available budget. Because you are just going to run around in circles if the research house comes back with a beautiful proposal of R1,000,000 and you have R100,000 available. It means they have to redo the proposal, but it means that they have to rethink their methodology, how they're going to do it, the resources, the timing. So be very clear about what is the available budget. And remember, for your assignment, it doesn't have to be correct. Just show us that you thought about budget and that you give an amount. Then the format of the proposal. The format is really, it is the research proposal, that is the outcome of your brief. And quite often when you have a briefing document, you will end up briefing more than one company and you will receive more than one research proposal. Now the research agencies each have their own way of putting a proposal together. They have their own format, the flow of their content, the different headings, different look and feel. And you have to be specific on what you want. What do you want to include in the proposal? What do you want to exclude? What format do you want your proposal in? Is it going to be written? Is it going to be a paper? Is it going to be electronic? Do they have to present it? Is it only going to be electronic? Is it only going to be a presentation with a handout at the presentation? When do you want the proposal? Be very specific, because otherwise you're going to get a proposal that don't meet your needs. And you might end up discarding that proposal and choose another research supplier for the wrong reason, just because their proposal do not meet your expectations. Then the selection criteria. Especially if you brief more than one research agency. How are you going to select the agency? Make sure up front that you know what your selection criteria is. Things that you can look at is going to be their understanding of the business and research proposal. Did they do a bit more research? Did they show you that they actually investigated the business and research problem? Do they have experience in a specific industry? Let's say it is the clothing industry. Do they understand the clothing industry? Because this is totally new to them. Um, if you look for innovation in the approach to the research, then you have to then that has to be one of your selection criteria. Are you looking for new techniques or models? Then that's going to be one of your selection criteria. Maybe you look for a company that has global exposure, that can tap into brands outside your country. Maybe the cost in the budget is going to be key, or the timing, or maybe the skills and the resources. These are things that you can consider as selection criteria. But remember, the things that you consider as your selection criteria, you have to share it in your briefing document because the research supplier, when they prepare a proposal, need to be aware of it because your evaluation of the proposals have to be fair. You have to treat all of them equal. So now we get to the last bit of your assignment, where they ask you to do some secondary research on the scenario. Okay, so there are two elements in research. There's secondary research and there's primary research. What's the difference? Secondary research is information that's already available. Even when once you've done your business problem, you've done the research problem, you do your background information, you come across all this information that already address a big part of your research problem and your business problem, or it gives you just background information about your business and research problem. That's secondary research. Primary research is the information is not available yet. You cannot answer your business problem and your research problem. Therefore, you now have to go and do research. You have to go and do either quantitative or qualitative or combination of the two to get the information. That's the difference between the two. So if they ask you to do secondary research, people talk about secondary research as desk research. You sit behind your desk and you look for the information. You're not out there speaking to people. You look for information in reports out there, existing reports out there, databases. You find information in libraries, online libraries. You do web searches. If you're with a company, maybe they were completed historical research that can help you. There might be case studies that refer back to your research problem and business problem that can help you. And this usually takes place before you make your final decision to go ahead with primary research or not. It will guide you. It will help you to say, hang on, guys, we know so much about this topic, about this business problem, about this research problem. Why on earth are we still going to do primary research? There's so much information out there. Or it can tell you there is so little that we still need to do primary research, or there are certain elements of my research problem and business problem, there's information, but certain elements there aren't. Or there is information, but I'm not too sure how relevant it is, and I have to verify it. So that is why you do secondary research. It also gives you so much information about your background. And quite often also when you ask to do a literature review, this is exactly what you do. You do secondary research. You sit and you do a desk research. Now these days, how do you go about doing secondary research? Let's face it, it's going to be online. It's definitely going to be online. And first of all, you have to identify what information are you looking for. So how do you do about it? How do you identify what information you're looking for? You go to your research problem. That is how you identify what information are you looking for. You go to your research problem and you look at your research objectives. And they will tell you what information you're looking for. Then you go and you sit and identify potential information sources. Maybe you're in a company where there are already research done that can help you. Um, Maybe there's a library, there's textbooks, but the bottom line is that all of us these days immediately jump onto our computers and we do a Google search. And that's exactly what you guys are going to do here. You are going to go and search for information. You're going to look for potential sources that can give you information. But you have to evaluate the suitability of the information source. Remember the suitability of the information source. What do I mean by that? This is an academic document. Your assignment is an academic document. You cannot use non-academic sources. What's a non-academic source? Wikipedia. No, that's not acceptable. The U magazine. Girls' night out. The talk around the table. Dinner table talk. The Skinner in the corridor. No, you have to look for real, suitable, credible information sources. Some papers, decent websites that are out there. Then you have to evaluate the quality of that information. So it's not the source now it's the information. What is the quality of the information? How do we do that? First of all, the information cannot be older than 10 years. If it's older than 10 years, don't use it. It's outdated. Secondly, you look at what was the objective? Why did they gather that information? What was the objective? Does it relate back to your objective? Who did it? Which company? Etc. What methodology did they follow? Was it a credible methodology, proper research, or was it just anecdotes that they get from this person and that person and they wrote a whole story about a sample of one? So really evaluate the quality of the information. And another way of evaluating it, is there more than one source available that provide you with the same trends, the same findings, the same conclusions? That usually gives you also an idea that you're working with quality information. While you do the searches, I suggest that you keep a log of what you're searching and where you're searching, the search words that you use. Because sometimes you end up doing the same thing over and over and over, and you're getting nowhere. So keep a log of all the sources, the ones that worked for you, the ones that didn't work, the keywords that you use for search, and a way of if you have too much information, string your keywords together. If you have too little information, take your search words apart and search on one or two words and try and find more information like that. Another tip here is use more than one search engine because they have different information sources. So use Chrome, use Firefox, use Google, but use more than one in a search engine. That usually helps to give you a bigger variety of information sources. Then you have to start reading through it. You have to note the findings, and then you have to write and summarize your findings. But this is not where to stop. Referencing. Remember, when you do secondary research, you use information from sources that is out there. So you have to do referencing. You have to use in-text citation and you have to use referencing. Now, when you do your assignment, the format is So important. I see so many people losing unnecessary marks. Yeah. Because remember, they mark your assignments and they use negative marking. So what does that mean? It means that a question counts 10. They mark you on the question. You score 9 out of 10. The next question you score 5 out of 10. The next question you score 5 out of 10 and you end up with 19 out of 30. Now they calculate the negative mark. So if your layout and your format is incorrect, minus some points. If your in-text citation is incorrect, minus some points. If your referencing is incorrect, minus some points. So it can mean that you can lose up to 15 marks. 15. It is crazy. So go onto eBay, make sure that you use the right format. And just in terms of format, it is Arial 12, 1.5 line spacing. I'm repeating, Arial 12, 1.5 line spacing, and your format is justified. What does justified mean? Justified means your margin on your left hand side, your writing makes a solid block line, and on your right hand side there's not indents on the right hand side. That if you use justified format, then the software will automatically space your words so that your lines on left and right form a solid, the words follow a solid line. So it's not left, it's not right, it's not centered, it's justified. At the top of each page, put your name or your initials and your surname, your student number, and the module. So BRT201, whatever the module is, on the top of every page. Then number every page. And it's not page 1, page 2, page 3. If your assignment is 15 pages, it's page 1 of 15, page 2 of 15. Your referencing is at the end of your document. And it's referencing, it's not bibliography. You use referencing. So these are just the simple things that you need to do to make sure that you don't lose unnecessary marks. Give a clear heading of your questionnaire. It's question number 1. Question number 1.1. Bold, highlighted, and then you start answering it. Question 1.2, bold, underline it, and then you start answering the question. Make sure that your questions follow. You will not believe it, but sometimes students do question 1, and then they jump to 4, and then they go back to 3, and then 2. You will lose marks for that. Make sure that it's in chronological order. Make sure that you answer every question. You will not lose negative, but I mean, we've covered everything tonight, so you should be able to answer every question. Make sure that you go onto eLearn. Make sure that you use the correct format for in-text citation. That's almost a lesson on its own, and the correct format for referencing. That's also a lesson on its own. But there are detailed guidelines on eLearn, just sort of in terms of referencing. Typical mistakes that people do with referencing is they number it. Number 1, number 2, number 3. No, we don't number. We don't use indents. We just list them the one after the other in alphabetical order. Don't just list them, they're in alphabetical order. Secondly, we do not categorize them. So we do not list all the websites, then all the textbooks, then all the published articles. You mix them and they're in alphabetical order. And you don't number them. Make sure that you put dates in when you reference your online searches, make sure that you show the date that it was accessed, etc. Those are little mistakes that people make and they lose unnecessary marks. And that basically brings us at the end of our session. It is now time for you guys to type in any questions. While you're typing questions, I'm just quickly going to zip out to Genevieve to ask her to come and fix something on my screen because right now I cannot see your questions. But by the time she has fixed it, then I'm sure you will be finished typing your questions. So you guys go ahead, start typing your questions. I will quickly ask Genevieve to fix my screen. Let's see. Kavishan, yes, this video will be available on eLearn. You just have to give Genevieve a day or two because a lot of online tutorials are taking place. So it will take her about a day or two to upload it on eLearn, but it will definitely be available on eLearn. Any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay. So this has been us for tonight. I really hope that this will help you guys with your assignment. I've definitely covered all the aspects that you need to know for your assignment. You need to know how to write a business problem, how to write a research problem, how to develop research objectives from that. You have to be able to write a briefing document. We've covered all the building blocks. You have to, on the scenario, give the different types of research and which one you recommend. We've covered that. And then the last question, you have to do some secondary research to find more information on the scenario, and we've covered that. So all the best. I really hope it goes well. Have a great evening and ace that assignment. Good night.